I call this meeting of Sylvania City Council for January 2nd, 2024 to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Fry?
Here.
Mr. Hanson?
Here.
Mr. Hanem?
Here.
Mr. McCann?
Here.
Mr. Richardson?
Here.
Ms. Pfaff? Here. Mrs. Westfall?
Here.
All 7 members of City Council are present, therefore a quorum does exist. Welcome, Sharon. Good to see the press here. We appreciate that. Please join us in our first Pledge of Allegiance of the year. This meeting led by Mr. Hanson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Additions to the agenda. I have no items this evening. Mr. Fry.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Members of City Council. Additions or changes to the agenda. Mr. Sanford.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Chief Miller.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Schroyer.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Aller.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Or Ms. Brining.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
With that, is there a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and the agenda for this evening's meeting is approved. On to agenda item 4, approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting on December 18th. Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move adoption of the meeting minutes for the council meeting of December 18th, 2023 as submitted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes from December 18th, 2023 submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and those meeting minutes are approved as submitted. We are already to agenda item 5. We have several items from the service director. First one is the Balfour Road Waterline Improvement Project bids report. Mr. Aller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We received 7 bids for the project back in mid-December. The bids were quite competitive. We had about, I think, 3 or 4 of the bids were within 5% of each other. The low bid was submitted by Geddes Paving and Excavating, and we're almost 24% underneath the engineer's estimate. We have done some work with Geddes Paving. It's been a while, back in 2015. They've also been the subcontractor for some other projects in town, and we've never had an issue with them. They do a pretty quality contractor. Their bid was in the amount of $761,024. This project was part of the 2024 capital improvement plan. Will be paid out of the water fund, and we would recommend moving forward with an award to Geddes Paving.
Perhaps a description of the scope of work, Mr. Aller.
Basically, water line replacement from Monroe Street all the way, Alexis Road, and then all the way to the north end of Balfour Road. This project replaces 4-inch and 6-inch water lines that are still in place, and we're upgrading those to 8-inch water lines. A portion of it is actually 12-inch, planning for the crossing that will be coming across US 23 as part of the interchange project.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Fry.
Mr. Aller, when you say all of Balfour, I think Balfour so we're talking about the section that dead ends, but there's a smaller other section of Balfour. Does that go up that far?
It does not go to the north, basically to the dead end.
To the dead end,
my
okay,
apologies.
okay. And I'm going from my memory on this map, this Cushman?
Yes.
Cushman is immediately to the west?
Yes.
So when we talk about a water line replacement, is that on the side of the road? Are we gonna change the property in any way, shape, or form for this? Or we're gonna replace it as it sat before, correct?
Sorry about that, didn't mean to interrupt you. No storm sewer work is being done as part of this project. It's just strictly a water line replacement.
So no
The asphalt
curbs?
will be replaced in kind when
Okay.
we're done, but yeah,
No curbs or anything okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Eller, timeline?
I did not get, we did not, have not received a schedule from Geddes. The completion date on it was, I believe, mid-June, Mr. McCann, but we have not gotten the project schedule yet to know for sure when they plan on starting. If weather cooperates, this is work that could be done through the winter, so.
Oh,
Mr. Eller, another question on the bidding. For a while, we saw bids that were frequently over the engineer's estimate. This is obviously substantially less than the engineer's estimate. Do you think the ship's starting to right in regards to this?
Yeah, I think things are starting to balance out a little bit. I don't think we've dropped, but I don't think we're climbing anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we've kind of hit the plateau. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's good news, obviously. Thank you.
The other thing that helped us here was 7 bids. That's pretty,
Yeah.
we haven't had 7 bids on a project in quite a while.
Which indicates maybe they're looking for a little bit of work.
Yep.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I have experience with Geddes paving as well, not for several years, but they have been on several of my architectural improvement projects. Last project I remember reading they got the contract for was the lengthening of the westbound exit ramp from 475 to Talmadge Road. That's a number of years ago, but they worked well for ODOT as well. That was quite a big extension of that exit ramp. All right. We have ordinance number 1, 2024. Mr. McCann.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce by title only, ordinance number 1-2024, accepting the bid of Geddes Paving and Excavating, Inc., and awarding the contract for the Balfour Road Waterline Improvement Project to same, authorizing the expenditure for the improvements in the amount of $761,024, appropriating funds therefore. I'd move passage of ordinance number 1-2024 as an emergency measure.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance number 1, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and ordinance 1, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. Agenda item 6 has to do with change order number 2 for the improvement project at Monroe and Silica and the Silica Drive Bridge replacement. Mr. Aller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As this project moves along, we're at about a 90% completion for the project. The primary things that need to be completed yet are the street lighting being replaced and traffic signals being finished up. The finished seeding and restoration will take place next spring when the weather conditions get better. As part of this change order, we had some additional repairs that needed around the library's digital sign. When we got some of the sidewalk and other excavation completed around, we weren't comfortable with some of the grade differences that we ended up with there, and so we added some handrails for some safety purposes. And then we had some issues with the water line connections to this building, and then we actually see some savings with some changes that we did to the subgrade design in the project. As a result of all of these items, we have a total change order in the amount of $28,304.44. And that amount would take the project to $5,987,094.20. As a whole on this project, we are at about 1.7%, I believe, in change orders, which is anything below, if you're below 5, you're considered pretty successful. If you get above 5, you kind of ask some questions. But we're in pretty good shape on this project, I believe.
And we're okay in regard to the original budget.
The original budget, if you remember, this is one of the projects that Mr. Fry referred to that
Yep.
came in way above. The original budget, we are probably about 40% over the original budget.
Long way over, okay. But low change orders,
Yeah. No, not due to change orders, just due to the market.
right. We discussed 2 weeks ago the continuing work that was going on in the southbound lane of Silica, north of the bridge. That is not part of our contract work. I think council ought to hear what was going on there with the gas line.
That's a project Columbia Gas had. We had talked about the project with them prior to our project even beginning, well in advance of our project even beginning. They were concerned that they would not be able to get their project finished before our project started, so they elected to wait until afterwards. That's the work that you see going on now at the bridge and is taking along there. They're basically replacing their old low pressure gas line that went along there, and they're replacing it with a medium pressure. They are finding that the rock is a lot harder than what they initially anticipated, and they're struggling getting through. So that project has taken quite a bit longer. It was supposed to have been wrapped up by December 15th because of weather concerns. Once the weather drops to 15 degrees, then that's when they see their gas needs increase substantially in the city. Lucky for them, the weather has cooperated, but they're struggling with that one. The rock is really slowing them down.
Questions for Mr. Adler? All right, we do have proposed ordinance 2, 2024 for this change order number 2. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to introduce ordinance number 2, 2024, by title only, authorizing the mayor and director of finance to approve change order number 2 to this city's agreement with Moser Construction for the Monroe Street and Silica Drive intersection improvement and Silica Drive bridge replacement project to reflect the cost of several new scope of work items, increasing the contract amount by $28,304.44, appropriating funds therefore, and I move passage as an emergency measure.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance number 2, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and ordinance 2, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. We are now to agenda item 7. This has to do with the Monroe Street Traffic Signal Improvement Project. Mr. Aller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This project is part of an upgrade and coordination project that we had in our capital improvement plan for a few years. With the changes that were being done with the Monroe Silica project and then the Haroon Monroe project, knowing that the interchange project is coming up, now is the time to get the remainder of the system designed and ready to move forward. The design is progressing. We're at the point now where we're ready to start discussing real estate acquisition for additional right-of-way. This is for signals that will be replaced at Fifth Third and Major Magic's intersection, Corey Road, and then the ProMedica Health and Wellness drive that goes into there. West Erie Realty is a company that we've worked with on almost all of our projects when it comes to right-of-way acquisition. They have provided a proposal in the amount of $49,975. This work was scheduled in the 2024 capital improvement budget, and it's planned to obtain the right-of-way and complete the design, and then actually construct the project in 2025 ahead of the resurfacing work planned on Monroe Street. We recommend approval of the agreement with West Erie Realty in the amount of $49,975.
Questions for Mr. Aller? We do have ordinance number 3, 2024 to authorize this contract. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce ordinance number 3, 2024 by title only, accepting the proposal of WE Realty Solutions Limited to provide right-of-way acquisition services relative to the Monroe Street Traffic Signal Improvement Project, appropriating funds therefore in the amount of $49,975, and I move passage as an emergency measure.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance number 3, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and ordinance 3, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. We're now up to agenda item 8. This is also for appropriating additional funds this is for the actual acquisition costs for the Monroe Street US 23 interchange improvement projects. Mr. Aller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a confusing situation. Typically, when you have an agreement with ODOT and then you modify that agreement, they typically they want to do an amendment to the agreement. For some reason on this project, they said, no, we don't need to do an amendment. Let's just make the dollars right with what the new estimates are. So typically, we would come to you with just an approval to amend the agreement, which would take care of all of the financial situations and make everything nice and clean. In this case, by them taking that position, we initially had approved right-of-way acquisition in the amount of $535,000. That amount has increased to $638,500, and those are strictly estimates at this stage. But that's it's our requirement to match those right away, to have those funds available in ODOT's accounts so that they can move forward. We had initially paid $286,000 of those funds in 2023, and ODOT had agreed that we would be able to pay the remaining balance in 2024. In 2023, we had actually appropriated the entire amount of $535,000, and so the only thing that we need to do from an appropriation standpoint, and how Leslie made sense of all of this, I give her all the credit in the world. But we need to basically approve the additional appropriation of $103,500 in order to have sufficient funds to be able to provide to ODOT for real estate acquisition. And my letter has much different numbers than what ended up being in this ordinance, but that is because of the appropriation that had been done. I apologize for the confusion. Unfortunately, when Leslie was getting this put together, I wasn't in the office, and she was trying to get things put together with the information that she had. And she has it perfectly accurate. But my letter does not do you any favors in trying to explain how we got here, and I apologize for that.
Mr. Eller, we talked earlier today about which properties or where these properties are for acquisition. Just generally, what properties will they be working on?
The ones that directly come to mind are BP gas station will be impacted, Kroger will be impacted, the northwest corner of Acres and Alexis, I cannot think of the owner of that property. The dental office on the northeast corner. I think we just barely get into the Taco Bell property. Those are the ones that I can think of that will be affected. We are not into the Dave White property at all. And I think
That one, he wants us to come into he wants some of our property.
Yeah.
And he's lobbying me for it.
So, Mr. Aller, let me make sure that I understand this. Council authorized 535 grand last year. We made a down payment of 286, correct? But the authorization was for the full 535. We're increasing the amount, the total amount, by the 100 and, yeah, the 130, whatever. And that takes us to the total amount of 638 grand, correct?
Correct.
So what we're paying in '24 is the difference between the 638 and the 286.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
I apologize for the confusion.
I read it a couple times and I was like, I'm not sure. So, okay, that helps me a lot, but I appreciate that.
I was, Leslie was trying to figure out my letter, and I was, as I indicated, I wasn't in the office, and we finally touched base.
See, you went on vacation for a week.
That's right.
Yeah, so
You
I
let the lawyer try
My
to do.
apologies.
This is all our money.
Yes.
Mr. Brian, you know, Mr. Aller said typically ODOT would put this in an amendment.
Yeah,
Is there any risk to not having it in an amendment?
no, these are still estimates, and that is, we even had Joe reach out to ODOT to make sure, because when this has happened, I believe it was the, Haruna Monroe
Haruna,
project,
yeah.
where they came back to us and we needed to appropriate more for additional right-of-way acquisition costs, and they did require an amendment to the original agreement for property acquisition, but in this case, they're fine. There's enough wiggle room in the contract language that they feel comfortable just having us appropriate the additional funds without approving an amendment to the agreement.
This doesn't change their obligation.
Correct. It's our obligation anyway.
Thank you.
All right, you do have in your council packets ordinance number 4, 2024, authorizing this addition, or appropriating this additional funds in the amount of $103,500 to increase our commitment this year from $249,000 to $352,500. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce ordinance number 4-2024 by title only, appropriating additional funds for the right-of-way acquisition costs relative to the Monroe Street and US 23 improvement projects in the amount of $103,500, and I move passage as an emergency measure.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance number 4, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and ordinance 4, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. Agenda number 9. If you recall, earlier this year, we received notice from Toledo Memorial Park that they wanted to terminate this contract with the city for using their property across the Michigan line as our composting field. Mr. Aller researched and brought to you a contract to take our recyclable green waste to A&J on Sylvania Avenue. And we've been through a leaf season with that, and apparently it's gone pretty well. And Mr. Aller is back with a further proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that process through the leaf collection season went very well. We didn't have any issues either from the city side or on the vendor side. And don't anticipate any moving forward as we move into the green yard waste season coming this spring. At the time that they had made their initial proposal to basically get us covered, if you will, in needing to be off of that site by August 31st of this year. They had also proposed that they were willing to, in exchange for a 2-year extension on the contract, that they would be willing to remove the existing material on site that we have up there and take it to their site. And they would do all of the removal, they do the loading, the trucking, and all of that work. so that we didn't have to find a home for it, so to speak. In taking a look at the material that's up there and the material that we will need some of the material to kind of put the site back to original condition, which is a requirement of our lease. So we will be retaining some of that material up there. But in looking at how the operation went through leaf season, knowing what we have going, would be involved in getting that material moved. And their offer, we believe that it's prudent to move forward at this time. If the city, as we look into this, if the city should decide that they want to, that we want to continue operating a compost site and find another site and get it approved and everything of that nature through Ohio EPA, we're looking at probably a year's time to get that accomplished. So we're looking at, another year to get that accomplished, have a home for it. A&J, or Sylvania Compost, is willing to do that. And I think that in reality, that operation will be something that we may be coming to you to change on a more permanent basis. When you take a look at what they're charging us and take a look at what it costs us to operate a site like that, I think it's probably going to come out in favor of going to the private market for this type of operation. But what they have proposed is if you recall, our current agreement is $50,000 through August of this year of 2024. They proposed 2-year extensions at 2% increases on each of those years. So 24 to 25 would be $51,000 for the year, and 25 to 26 would be $52,020 for the year. But I do believe that this is the wise way to move forward, and would recommend approval of this contract extension.
Mr. Eller? A few months ago, when you brought the original agreement for this year to us, you mentioned during that, that there was an older piece of equipment that we had that still had a significant value. Couple questions. That, I don't see that being included in this agreement, is that correct?
That's correct. We are in discussions with them on that, but I actually have to speak with the law director to see if if we're required to post that on a.
That was my next question. You beat me to it. So, as usual, you're ahead of me on that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That was one, because the numbers you were tossing around, we're not talking about 20-year-old truck now on putting it on gov deals. This is a real and material amount of money for
Similar,
value.
we've looked on gov deals and some bidding sites, some other bidding sites, and that piece of equipment is going for anywhere from about $50,000 to $75,000.
Okay.
So it's a ballpark number. Any auction is different.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
But they are interested in it with the additional material that is going to be coming their way. They could make use of it. So we're taking a look at what our options are.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Eller, I have a question as well. I believe we sell or offer to sell compost to the public. Does that impact that process in any way?
It does impact that a little bit. They can still purchase it, but they would be purchasing it from A&J Landscaping. So.
Just different locations, same,
Yep.
I mean, you don't foresee any pricing changes or?
Now, that is something that we're going to talk long-term. If we go to a long-term contract, in the short term, they will be able to, they'll have the authorization to charge their commercial pricing. But long-term, that's something that we might be able to work out. But in essence, what ends up happening in there, other places have tried to do that, and our $50,000 is going to become $75,000. People will be able to buy it cheaper, but it's going to cost us more money on the front end. So, yeah. So.
consider this an extension of long-term process the city has taken to privatize its operations where it's more efficient. Some of you may recall that the city used to operate its own recyclable material collection and recycling plant. It was a clean MRF at the time. The city invested in trailers to collect those materials because there was not a private contractor to do it. But when there were private contractors, became much more efficient to bid the work and have a private contractor pick up those recyclables as they do now. And I think this is a natural extension of that. Although we didn't pay rent, I don't believe, for the property up there north of the Michigan line, just the property taxes, we had to man the site. What we're saving are the personnel necessary to man that site and the cost. We would hire somebody to come and turn the rows. I watched that process happening to a different recycling plant, the one that's down there south of Bancroft, north of Door on the west side of 475. That's quite an operation. They brought in somebody to turn those rows. And that was a pretty big piece of equipment down there. All right, we do have ordinance 5, 2024 to extend this contract for those 2 years. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to introduce by title only ordinance number 5-2024, authorizing the mayor and director of finance to enter into an extension agreement with Sylvania Compost and Recycling LLC to provide green yard waste drop-off site from September 1st, 2024 through September 30th, 2026. I move for passage of ordinance number 5-2024 as an emergency measure.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance number 5, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and ordinance 5, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. Agenda item 10 is for consultant letters of interest for Eldon Ditch Watershed Improvements Phases 2 and 3. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Phase 1 of this project is the Veterans Memorial Detention Basin, and that is about 80% complete. I'd hoped that it would be wrapped up by now, but unfortunately that project got behind and could not catch up before the weather broke here. So phases 2 and 3 are in, phase 2 actually is in the Eleanor Court, Fairview Drive, Parkwood Boulevard area. And that also includes slip lining of the box culvert that goes underneath Main Street. And that'll be lined with a 48-inch storm sewer. Phase 3 includes sections of Erie Street, as well as Eldon Drive and Trailway. And those 3 phases will essentially get, what we found was that there were changes made to the storm sewer in the area of Trailway and Eldon Drive. And those changes were done to alleviate flooding concerns that were taking place there. Unfortunately, when those were done, it moved the problem upstream, if you will, and that's why we had the flooding in the Veterans Memorial Park area then. So we are getting all of this fixed in the proper manner together and designed all at once so that properly. So we're ready to go out for letters of interest from consultants to get the design moving on those 2 phases, and would ask for permission to do so.
Just to clarify, the stormwater is coming south towards Monroe Street underneath Parkwood.
Correct.
And it goes underneath Monroe Street, just west of Parkwood, and then it turns west in the ditch and goes into 10 Mile Creek. Not into those people's backyards, but in a swale.
In a swale, yeah.
And it heads east and gets into the creek.
It heads east and goes into the creek, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Eller, the slip line underneath Monroe Street, obviously there's a lot of work that's been done on Monroe Street just to the east of that this year, as you're painfully well aware. Do you anticipate that this would disrupt traffic for any material amount of time? Since it's slip lining, I wouldn't think so, but I'm just double checking.
I don't think we'll have any sort of traffic. There may be a day here or there.
Right.
to move equipment and stuff, but yeah.
Nothing material. Okay, thank you.
Okay, what we need now is a motion to authorize the service director to begin consultant letter of interest solicitations. Mr. McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to authorize a letter of interest by the service director for the Luke Eldon Ditch Watershed Improvements Phases 2 and 3.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to begin that solicitation of consultant letters of interest. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 11, I believe, is an annual or a resolution allowing the clerk of council to represent the mayor and city council's obligation to receive public records law updates from the Secretary of State. Did I say that right? Leslie,
Yes.
okay.
We do this is an annual.
This is an annual event, and I think you've all been through the training. Have there been any substantial changes in that law?
No.
I always encourage newly elected officials to go through it at least once. TMACOG used to organize that here locally, but they're not, the Secretary of State's now taken that over entirely. I think that Laura will do a wonderful job for us. And I recommend approving resolution number 1, 2024 for that designation. Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce resolution number 1, 2024, and read by title only. A resolution designating the clerk of council as the mayor and city council's designee to attend training programs and seminars about the public records law as required by the Ohio Revised Code, section 109.43. I move for passage of resolution 1, 2024 as an emergency measure.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for passage of resolution number 1, 2024 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and resolution 1, 2024 is enacted as an emergency measure. Turning to the back page, agenda item 12 on our agenda. Mr. Schroyer, you have some IT equipment ready to go on the market.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm gonna turn this over to Chuck. His staff has
I
been.
thought about going directly, but I didn't wanna,
His staff has been working hard on identifying and getting this equipment.
I know the mayor gets uncomfortable with the collection of stuff in the third floor attic.
Indeed, this is me following through with my promise to you on that, Mayor. So. There was some sweeping involved too.
Okay, can you describe generally what the equipment is?
The majority of it, all of it actually, is obsolete IT-related equipment, PCs, old phones, things like that. We continue to clean that third floor out.
And by going to Gulf Deals, you feel that there is value there?
Probably not a lot, but
It's more following the procedures, the law, that we have to put it out there for auction. We're not, there's quite possibly we won't get bids on some of the items. But then we'd be able to dispose of them after that.
the last time we put up like 11 copiers, I think we sold one for $50. So, yeah, there's not a lot of value there, but yeah, following through with.
All right.
2 questions.
Yes,
I'll take it all to your house.
3. One is I appreciate the NIST standard for data eradication. Were we able to accomplish that, or was that?
Yes. If we weren't, we actually were able to go in and dismantle and find the drives and the copiers and things and remove them. And then ultimately, when it talks about the police policies, procedures, what we do is we provide them to the PD and they take them up to the foundry and they dump them in there. So they're destroyed.
Actual data destruction versus eradication.
Yeah.
And the second is, if if there is no value on the market, what happens to the equipment then?
We recycle it through Frogtown here in Sylvania.
And is there a cost incurred
No.
at that? Thank you.
Okay, what we need is a motion to approve this obsolete IT equipment to be offered for auction on Gov Deals. Mr. Fry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make a motion to put the obsolete IT equipment that was described by Mr. Silvernail on his January 2nd, 2024 memo to members of council and Mayor Stahl on Gov Deals for auction and see if we get any actual results from it. It's a long motion, I apologize.
We've been surprised in the
Was
past.
it?
We've been surprised in the past with things we put up there.
Never know.
Somebody might need it to put into their existing operations and be happy to have it. The motion was made. Was there a second?
Brian?
All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Are there any committee reports or committee referrals to be made at this time? Hearing none, I draw your attention to information item A. We have a flyer in here for the 2024 TMACOG General Assembly on January 19th. That's a Friday this year. It's happening on Friday morning. It's always an interesting meeting to go to rub shoulders with your peers from other communities around TMACOG's Northwest Ohio area. And I think this year you will find even more interesting with a new general manager of TMACOG and Sandy Spank. She is proposing some changes to the bylaws and the way that the organization will run. There's also will be an update on the work to establish an economic development zone as defined by the federal government to bring more economic development money to Northwest Ohio. With that, if there's no further discussion, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and this council stands adjourned until its next regularly scheduled meeting 2 weeks from tonight on Tuesday, January 16th at 7:30 PM in these council chambers. Thank you.